everybody? It's your boy Rudy here to bring you guys another podcast. If you guys are here listening, I sure appreciate you guys being here for tuning in. You can find me on the major podcast, Apple Music and Spotify. Most of the major ones, I'm pretty sure I hooked my account up to. But today we are doing a kind of like a so here's a deal. So I've been in the market for a new trail bike. My current trail bike, which is like my everyday do everything bike, which is what I'm looking for to take place of, is my Bronson. Now, I've had my Bronson since December of 2019. It was the first iteration of the new V3 model. So it's a V3 Bronson 2019 model. And it comes factory as a 160 fork, 150 frame on a 27.5 platform. It's got some flip chip settings on there. So it goes from 65.5 Headtube Angle to 65.1, I'm pretty sure. So a little bit of difference there. Of course, it changes the bottom bracket, and it also changes the seat tube angle as well, by very minor increments, right? So what I've done with that bike is I overforked it. I put a Zeb on it at one time, had a Zeb on it for actually a very long time. Had the Zeb on there at 170 millimeters, and I had the Cascade component link on there, which made it 160. So I made that bike a bit bigger than it was really intended to be. And it helped me. It helped me find out what I want in a bike, because the next bike that I had purchased is a much bigger bike. I ended up getting a 2022 Norco Range, which is 170 front and rear on a 29er frame platform. Now, I've had other bikes here and there in between, but my Bronson has always been like my go-to bike for just doing everything. So initially I had that bike set up to do everything, but it was really built to do a lot of the excuse me, it was really built to do a lot of the bigger bike park, downhill orientated bike, being that I overforked it and I stretched it out with the Cascade component link, made it a lot more poppier. It is pedal friendly, but not the snappiest pedaler. Since all of that, I've actually taken and put the Fox 36 Elite with the Grip 2 back on the bike at 160 millimeters, and I've put the original link back in it with fresh bearings. And I've started pedaling that around. Again, like I said, more of my all everything bike, right? And I've been using my Norco for just taking to the bike park for like Spider Mountain, and doing the blacks and doing the blues really, really fast, and just being real comfortable. And anyways, so I taken the bike back so that I could try to feel what it's like to have it back in its former or its original generation of the bike platform. So I've used the flip chip in the high mode. I've used it in the low mode, and for most of all of San Antonio riding, which is a lot where I ride this bike inside of San Antonio, riding it on the flatter, more mellower flow trails, that high setting with the bottom bracket up tall, the seat tube up tall, and the slacker geometry at 65.5 degree head tube angle, really works well. Like it kind of gave the trail a bit more play. Okay. I should also mention that this bike is a size large. I probably should have went to a medium. If I were to do it all over again, I would go back to the medium. I would go to the medium. I wouldn't go to the large, because I think for it being a little bit big on me, it kind of took some of the trail play out of it on the mellower, flatter stuff, which I like to do. But being that, you know, in deep into the ride, when you get tired, the poppy and playfulness just kind of goes away because you're tired of trying to lug this big bike around for the day, and you're having to put more energy into it. So anyways, what point am I trying to make here? I'm looking for another bike that's going to be my do everything one quiver bike, unless I'm at like the bike park or I'm at a place where I can take my Norco. The thing about the Norco bike is that it's I don't want to say that it's one dimensional, excuse me, but it does have where it's really, really good at, which is like downhill parks, really chunky, steep sections of trail. It's not a very pedal friendly bike. It is, I mean, it pedals fine for what it is, you know, taking consideration the weight of the bike, what the bike's really built for. So it's, you know, I think in the Pink Bike review, they really said it best. I think Henry Quinney said it best whenever he said it's a downhill bike that you can pedal up. So it'll get there. It'll do the job. I always explain to everybody, it's like a tank. Like, it'll go up anything really easily, but slow. So anyways, so I need a bike that is a little bit more pedal friendly, and I want one that's a little bit more poppy and just made for all around trail use, right? So I'm going to tell you about the bikes that in this category that I wanted to have that were on my kind of like my short list, right? I'm going to start with the Eugene Propane. Really like that bike. And most of these bikes that I picked based on reviews that have been out there for like Bike Magazine, Single Track, YouTube channel, and like Pink Bike, right? So the Propane Eugene, 29 in front and rear. It's 140 front, 150 rear. It doesn't have a lot of flip chips and geometry switches and stuff like that, but I don't think if this is the bike that I wanted to go with, that is all that important. Okay. With that being said, you know, what they were saying on Pink Bike, for example, is that this bike just does everything like really well. And they felt that the bike pedaled really well. But nobody really talked about how the bike performed as far as like jibbing around. They didn't say that it couldn't. They just didn't like specify on it, right? If I were to have gotten this bike, I probably would have got it in a medium of their sizes. And their geometry, so you can go .65, which for most trails in my area, the 65.5 would be fine. I'm kind of looking through the geo settings, or the geo that this bike had, and I'm not so concerned with the bottom bracket height. I'm not really concerned with the chainstay length. All of these bikes are kind of right in there in the same area, between like 435 and 445 like this one is. But my biggest thing was having the adjustments, right? So this bike basically has the same adjustments as my Bronson does. So you can go from 65 degree head tube angle to 65.1 degree head tube angle, and of course your the effective seat tube angle changes with that, as well as the reach and as well as the bottom bracket height. So for me and what I like to do, so not only is 90% of my riding going to probably be in the San Antonio area, but I want to be able to have adjustments for whenever I go to other places, because I do go a lot of places. You know what? I should say, yeah, 90% of my riding in the year is going to be inside of San Antonio. We have Spider Mountain. We have Cat Mountain in Austin that is cheaper or steeper and gnarlier. But I'll be able to change. I wanted to have a bike that I can be able to change to the terrain that I'm going to be riding for that day, that week, that weekend, whatever it is, right? Anyways, this bike just didn't seem like it had all the changes I wanted to make. And I don't think that they offered, nobody said anything about this bike being able to be mulleted. And that was something that I wanted to try. If some of you may know, some of you may not know, the Bronson, the new version 4, so this is 2022, and they came out with this in 2021. So the year 2019 and 2020, they stuck with on the version 3 with 27.5 front and rear. In 2020, they opened up, no, I should say 2020. Yeah, 2020 as well. They still had the geometry, 27.5 front and rear. In 2021, and here we are in the start of 2022, they offer now a V4 model that is only mullet version. So 29 in front, 27.5 in the rear. And to me, that makes sense. If a lot of your riding is going to be downhill, I guess, and not so much flat trail terrain. I don't know for sure, because I haven't ridden a mullet bike before, not for any long length of time. But if you're going to pedal that on the trails all day, I just feel like you would be more efficient on the flatter, more mellower flow stuff if you just stuck with 29 in front and rear. Now, if you're doing a lot of pedaling up for the downs, which there's not a lot of here in Texas, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I guess only time will tell whenever I get a chance to ride a mullet bike for a long period of time, to be able to report how I like that or not. Going back to the Eugene real quick, it looks like a very light, fast bike, very capable bike. It just didn't have a lot of the geo changes that I wanted in a bike, okay? Now, the next bike that I was very interested in was the Score 4060 ST. This bike offered geometry settings, and you could do a mullet wheel setting, and by changing the shock and fork, you could go from a short travel 140 millimeter bike with a 150 fork to a 160, 170, but you would have to flip a chip, and you would have to get a different shock and fork, obviously. So that just seemed like a lot of extra parts that you would have to have lying around in order to make these geometry changes that you wanted to. Oh, and you could mullet this bike too, but using the geometry settings, you would have to have the other wheel, and then decide if you're going to do that with the bigger shock or the shorter shock and fork. So they also, I don't think they offered it. Oh yeah, they do. So the frame only, um, was pretty expensive, like pretty out there. So it was out of my reach, to be honest with you, because mm, it only comes in carbon. Now, aluminum versus carbon really wasn't that high of a deal for me. If I could find the bike that I wanted and it was going to be aluminum, I would be perfectly happy with that. Perfectly fine with an aluminum bike. Okay. But this bike did not. Okay. So, um, you could only spend the $37.99 looking at it now for the frame set. And that, I guess that's something I probably should have brought up earlier too, is the other thing is that I was really only looking for the frame set to build on, because I have a lot of extra parts in the garage that came off other bikes and other builds that I really wanted to use on my next bike build so that it would be cost effective. And then later on down the road, once I find out that I really like this bike or I don't like this bike, or I can see where it's lacking or what it needs, then I could kind of upgrade those components as I go and record this kind of on my YouTube channel. Okay. Now both the Propane Eugene and the Score 460 ST had reviews on them on YouTube that I was able to watch. The Score, I guess I didn't do a lot of research on as far as trying to find other YouTube videos. But Pink Bike does a really good job, and I can really trust what those guys say. I feel like they have good insight, because like me, they obviously get to ride a lot of different bikes. So I feel that I can take what they say, and what they recommend, or how they say the bike feels as the Holy Grail. I guess, I don't know, but I feel like I can respect their thoughts and what they say on how they think the bike feels, and what terrain it should be used for, what kind of person is looking for this bike, what this bike might be best suited for. And gosh, with the expense of the bikes, it just sucks that you have to try to find this one bike that does 90%. I mean, 80-20, right? 80-20 rule. For sure, 80-20 rule whenever it comes to your bike. You need to find a bike that 80% of the time it's going to be best suited for what you have available to ride and what you want to ride, how you want to ride, right? Because not all of us are, with there being so many categories, not all of us are big trail / enduro / downhill riders. That's how I feel like where I categorize at. But you don't have those trails offered to you. You might not have those trails offered to you. So if you're riding a lot of flat, flowy, single track stuff / XC, then maybe a shorter travel, either a downcountry bike, that's a new category, short travel 29er, or short travel XC bike, or a short travel trail bike, right? Which is like under 130 for sure. Under 130 millimeters of travel for a trail bike is probably like the best 80-20 rule that I think everybody should probably, not everybody, but I mean, most people inside of San Antonio or in my area probably fits into best, or that bike would fit into best. Now, if you're doing, there's just so many categories. If you're like me and you're going to be doing some enduros, right? You're going to be doing Spider Mountain. I'm a season pass holder. You like the chunkier, rough stuff, and you would like to have a little bit more confidence in having a bigger bike, then that's where, that category that I fit into, right? Which is like um, big features, enduro racing, downhill, right? So you need either a big trail bike, which I consider a big trail bike being 130 to 150 millimeters of travel on the rear, paired with same fork, 130 mil fork to 160 mil fork, I guess. So a little bit bigger on the fork side. And that's going to be your, but that bike is going to be is going to be 90-10, right? Like it's going to be like 90% good for all the things that you do, but 10% of the time you would need a slightly bigger bike, right? Or a downhill bike, right? So 5% for a slightly bigger bike, and 5% for actually needing a downhill bike for doing what you're trying to do. Anyways, so the score just wasn't quite the bike that I wanted, knowing the cost that was going to have to ensue to have the geometry settings and adjustability that I wanted. Okay. My third choice on this short list was the Gorilla Gravity Smash, and I really like what Gorilla Gravity does. I love that they are built inside of the United States. They made their own carbon fiber. Their carbon fiber is recyclable. Also, the Smash has lots of settings, Headtube Angle settings that it comes with, rear triangle settings that the bike comes with. Has a couple different, like flip chip styles, but it's just like shock position, I believe. Oh no, they have flip chip and shock positions, right? And you can mullet this bike. You can make this bike a mullet. Put a 27.5 rear / triangle on the rear, and mess with the head cup settings to get where you want. Fine tune the fit is their whole thing. And you could pair this bike. It's a 145 bike, so it's a little bit on the big end, right, for travel on a big trail bike, and you can pair it with a 170 millimeter fork. That's pretty big, from 150 to 170, right? So you can do like 145, 150, which is like the high tower, the Santa Cruz high tower. And I think that bike, like, yeah, I mean, it'd be tough for you to find terrain inside of Texas that this bike wouldn't just be able to smash. Like, really, seriously, like I think, and it would be 90% good for all of the terrain you can find, and you wouldn't have to buy a different shock or a different fork. Or if you were going to adjust that, then maybe you can just buy a different length for your fork, but you wouldn't have to buy a different shock. And you can mix and match and kind of find the geometry that works best for you. But there's not a lot of information on YouTube for the Smash that I could compare to like there is with the other bikes. And it's kind of a shame, because had I found somebody whose opinion that I trust, that rode the Gorilla Gravity bike Smash for an extended period of time, I think this bike is second on my list of bikes that I was going to purchase. That, and you can buy it frame only and build up. So again, the only carbon, they're Rev Carbon, and I don't know if they ship them with, they just started offering rear triangles that are carbon. They used to be just carbon fronts and triangles in the rear. but they just started making carbon fiber rear triangles too. So I don't know if this price for the frame set is, it's $29.95 if that comes with their carbon rear triangle or not. Anyways, I would have gotten the frame size 2. This frame overall is on the heavier side. This frame would be the heaviest of all of the bike's frames that I was looking at purchasing. Oh, that was the other thing. The Propane Eugene did not have an actual frame set that you could purchase. You could only buy, the only route that I could do if I wanted to buy the Eugene would have to have been going with the base model, which was like $4,300, I think, plus whatever shipping would have been here. So with that being said, the $29.95 with the carbon, Rev Carbon, like I said, is slightly, oh, it's quite a bit heavier. So just the weight of the bike, hang on, just doing a quick reading here. Just the weight of the bike is 7.7 pounds. Okay, so that's way on the heavier side. All these other bikes are carbon without the weight of the shock, are weighing at or around 5 pounds, 5.5 pounds. So this definitely would have been on the heavier side of the bikes. And this leads me to my next, the bike that I actually purchased, that I picked out, that I'm currently waiting to get here so that I can build on, because I'm really excited about it, because it offers everything that I want in a bike. It offers different sizes for my type. It offers the geometry adjustability, not only the head tube angle, the bottom bracket height, seat tube, but you can also mullet this bike, and you can do this without the cost of changing your fork height or your shock stroke length. But you do have to purchase a different link, which is way cheaper than purchasing a whole other shock or doing the work in changing out your fork. Also has quite a few other selling points that made me end up picking this bike. So the bike that I'm talking about is the Specialized Stumpjumper Evo. This bike is 150 millimeters of rear travel paired with 160 millimeters of front fork. Initially, I was going to purchase the aluminum version of this bike. A friend of mine just purchased it. Actually, I kind of talked him into it. He was looking for a different bike. The bike that he had prior to this was a Privateer 161. And, you know, he was worried in the very beginning about if this bike was too much for him. Meaning that he was thinking about getting the 141. Maybe he would have been happier with the 141 looking back now, but too late. So one day on the way home from an epic ride, a sick ride day, he was looking into getting something else. And I told him, I was like, man, if I was in the market for getting another bike, I would get the Stumpjumper Evo. And I start telling him about all of the things that this bike can do. The geometry changes, how you can mullet the bike, what the bike comes with, and well, he really, really liked what I was telling him. and started asking me more questions. He got on, of course, Specialized's website, and he starts looking at it and looking at all the options. And you can see there was a lot of key factors, you know, that this bike has that a lot of other bikes don't have. And I think that's what makes this bike so cool. I mean, it's like a transformer. You can literally transform this bike easily into fitting whatever trail situation you're going to be riding. And ultimately, that's why I ended up buying this bike as well. So my friend ended up buying the same day that we started talking about this, he found a frame. No, maybe it was the next morning. Anyways, he found a frame that he wanted. It was an S3 aluminum, which that's what I told him. I was like, dude, I'd go with aluminum. I mean, it's you know, for the frame with the shock is $2,000, and he basically had everything else to build a frame up bike, but he went ahead and just got everything new. And built a really, really sick bike. And like right away, he noticed, like the first time that we took it out, he noticed a huge difference in performance. And he had a Strava on, and the biggest thing was just, you know, being on a smaller bike, a little bit lighter of a bike, a little bit lighter of a build, that his climbing performance was like the number one thing that like went up, right? Like immediately. Well, not only his climbing performance, but he had mentioned that on the descent on the way down, that how much more composed and confident he was, even being on a smaller travel bike, that this was a better fit for him. And I think, you know, with the type of rider he is, that the Privateer 161 was just too much bike for him, that he's not at the part where he's not at the stage of his riding abilities to really push that bike. So I thought it would have been something that he would have been able to grow into maybe a little bit faster. But I think this is definitely the bike for south central south southern part of Texas, because of how versatile the bike can be with the geometry settings. And it's if you're going to do enduro races, southern enduro races, I think this is still a better bike, a faster bike, I think, than the Stumpjumper Enduro, which I see tons. There's a lot of racers, and they're way up there. You know, like the podium winners, a lot of them are riding the Stumpjumper Enduro. And currently I have my enduro bike, right? But I think you could run these enduro races on this bike and be just as fast. I honestly think here in the Southern Enduro race series that we have, if you put those same guys on these bikes, I honestly think they would probably be faster on these bikes than the enduro. I just think that this bike it's crazy, right? I think you can make this. I was just thinking, you can make this bike. Okay, so before I get ahead of myself, let me dive into again the reasons that I got this bike, right? Headtube Angle, 65.5 all the way down to 63 flat. That's even steeper than my Norco range. My Norco range is 63.3, so it's basically the same Headtube Angle, right? With that setting. And that bike, my range flies down the steepest stuff, like with so much confidence, having that big O 29er wheel in the front. I mean, it just flies down. So I'm really excited to kind of compare this bike with that head tube angle to my Norco range. But this bike is going to be so much lighter. My Norco range is over 40 pounds. And it has, you know, double down case tires. It has cush core. It's got, it still has like aluminum handlebars. It's got an NX group set, which is a little bit heavier. XO1 shifter, XO1 derailleur. But still, that bike's heavy. It's over 40 pounds. I bet that bike is probably close to 42 pounds, to be honest with you. I mean, it's a big bike. But when that bike gets up to speed, like, it doesn't feel like a 41 pound bike. On some of the smaller jumps and trying to like double stuff, like it feels a little bit heavier. But when you're at speed doing that, you don't really notice it. You really don't. And actually, that bike comes alive. The faster you push that bike, the more live that bike becomes. Anyways, back to the Stumpjumper Evo. The swap box. That was another big reason. Like, I think the swap box is just so cool. And it comes with another water bladder that you can put in there. So I'm really hoping that I can just lighten the load that I keep on myself. Because I'm a heavier rider anyway, so I don't want to put any more extra top center weight on the bike if I don't have to. I'd rather put it in that swap box and keep it all down there towards the bottom bracket. So really excited about that. I ended up going with the Stumpjumper Evo carbon frame. Now, I was totally happy with going with the aluminum one, and I was visiting with my wife about it, and I told her how much more it was, and my wife, being the awesome person that she is, she just, without hesitation, she's like, why are you, why wouldn't you? It's only this much more money, than the, and so I was going to get the aluminum, and I'm sure I would have been totally happy with the aluminum, but you do save over 2 pounds of weight by going with the Stumpjumper Evo carbon. So pretty stoked on that. And I get to build this bike up basically the way that I want it, with the parts that I have already. Not only do I have an extra 29er wheel set and tires, I also currently have a set of 27.5 plus wheels that I am going to get a new hoop for, and I will have a set of mullet. And I'm really, if anything, the thing that I'm most excited about is that this bike, I ordered the link so that you can make this bike a mullet by just simply switching out the link and putting a 27.5 rear tire on it. That's probably the thing that I am most excited about, because not only for testing reasons for my YouTube channel, because I'm really interested on how that's going to feel like on a day-to-day ride with the mullet setting, you know what I mean? Trying to find the best configuration for how I like to ride and what I like to ride. And ultimately that's why I picked this bike, was just because it's not going, and with their mullet link, it keeps your geo the exact same. It keeps your bottom bracket the exact same, unless you're flipping the chip, you know what I mean? So you don't lose and you don't gain any other features by putting the mullet link on, other than just having a smaller back wheel and a shorter wheelbase. That is it. That's it. So I'm super stoked about all the things on this bike. The swap box, the geometry adjustments, it's another carbon bike, and I haven't really spent enough time on aluminum bikes. I probably should wet aluminum just to see what the big deal is. Oh, the other thing that I'm really happy about is the sizing. So Specialized has their S sizing, right? S1, 2, 3, 4. This bike has all the way up to S6, right? I've ridden an S4. That size was probably that size was too big for me. It wasn't as bad. Excuse me. Whenever I flipped, so I had a standard Stumpjumper base model that I did a review on. That I purchased the bike as is, as you know, already built, not as a frame set. Um, anyways, so the flip chip in that one actually shortened up the rear chainstay and put the bottom bracket in a higher setting, and I put a shorter stem on it, and that made the S4 feel a lot better. Now, probably, I mean, I could have went with the S3. The S3 it would have fit me just fine, but I also fit at the very top end of an S2, and I wanted the bike to be as light and as playful as it can be, because like I had mentioned before earlier, 90% of the trails inside of San Antonio are more XC-ish type of trails. So it's a lot of like pedally, flow, single track stuff, which is fine. I love the trails that they have here, but they can get boring. They can just plain and simple, they can get pretty boring. And I think with this bike in an S2 sizing, I'll be able to have more energy, and the bike will be more spry and more lively to make these trails a little bit more fun. So that's why I ended up going with the S2 versus the S3. That, and you know, the S3 they say is more balanced. You know, I'm already at this point in my riding abilities, I'm a pretty confident rider in just about every situation. So I didn't see the reason for an S4 for sure. That's, to me, like I said, that was too big of a bike. And the S3, they say for my size, is more, you know, in between, you know, more of the middle ground. So the S2 being more on the play side, right? So you have play, balance, and inspirational downhill characteristics. So I went with two. I went with the ability to play, to have more play time with the bike, and hopefully less energy. And that's the other reason why going carbon is kind of nice too, because you lose a full 2 pounds of weight that you don't have to lug around on the bike. So I'm really happy. Oh, I'm also super excited because this bike comes with the Float X, not the DPX like last year's model did. And I think that's going to perform better for me because it's not quite an enduro fork. Or, I'm sorry, fork. It's not quite an enduro and I'm going to run that. It's a 175 crank set, or 170 crank set. But I've had problems with that crank set. I actually had it warrantied out. But I think I have a solution for trying to help the bolts stay snugged so that it doesn't have that problem of coming out, or that I had it warrantied for. So I think I'm going to run that full set for now because it's what I have. It's going to make this the cheapest build that I've ever built on a bike because I'm not getting a bunch of new parts. I already have these parts. Also for the brakes, I'm going with the Shimano 510s that came off of my Norco. Again, it's because it's what I have. So it's the cheapest, and they are 4-piston brakes, so I think they'll be fine. They'll be set up with 203 millimeter rotors, SLX rotors. So I think for a trail bike, I think they'll perform just fine, especially a light trail bike, because I had them. The last thing that I upgraded on my Norco range was the brakes, because I really thought that these brakes are going to be fine because they had everything else I had upgraded on there. It seemed like the brakes are fine. The brakes are fine. The brakes are fine. No big deal, right? Until I had gotten to a point where I had gotten behind a party line, and I'd gotten behind some slower guys that were slower than I'm used to going, and I had to keep on brake checking, stay behind them, not ride on their ass. And that's when I had noticed some brake fade, not bad brake fade, but some brake fade. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I found the breaking point on these. But I think I should mention though, right, that I'm a 220-pound rider working on losing weight. And the bike is, sub 42 pounds, right? So it's big on all spectrums, right? So I think on a bike that's, I imagine this bike's going to be right around that 33-pound weight, 33-pound weight. I'd like to keep it under 34 because with Cush Core in my Bronson, that's where it's at. But we'll see, I guess. I mean, we'll eventually see. The dropper seat post is a Trans-X Rage that came with my range. That is the exact same fit. It's a 170 mill dropper. The seat is just a WTB Silverado that I have left over from some other builds. The handlebars, I'm actually going to put my one-up components handlebars on there with a it's just a basic E13 40 millimeter stem. I'm going to try the 40 millimeter stem out first. Maybe go to a 50. Might be the first time I ever go up in stem length. We'll see. We'll see how the 40 does. And for the fork, ended up buying a brand new Marzocchi Bomber Z1. I'm a heavier guy. I could have spent the extra money and went with the Fox 36 Rhythm or Performance Elite or whatever. No, Rhythm Performance. I don't know. But what I think eventually that I really do, because I really think I'm going to like this bike, I'm going to keep it for a long time, and there's no big hurry to have the latest and greatest, on this bike. I think I'm going to enjoy upgrading it as it goes. So eventually I would like to have like a factory 36 on it, because those are even more stiff than the Marzocchi Bomber. But I think for performance, this, you can't go wrong with the Marzocchi Bomber and the grip damper that it has on it. Also, the Marzocchi is a little bit stiffer than the Fox 36 Rhythms. They're a little bit beefier on the bottom, which I think is going to be beneficial for me being a heavy rider. But eventually I will move up to the factory Fox 36, and possibly even the Fox 36 X2. No, the float. No, yeah, the X2. We'll see. We'll see how this thing performs, because I'm super stoked on it. I'm super stoked on trying to try all these new parts out on a new bike, and get it to be where I want it to be, instead of having to, just buy the base build. Oh, and the biggest, and the other thing is, right, so the biggest thing is that I'm basically going to have, like, in between a comp and a pro level build for $3,700, right? That's the price of the frame and the fork, because I didn't have another 29er fork, unless I was going to take the 29er fork off of my Norco, and that would have been a Zeb. You know what would be sick? And I thought, I didn't think about this until afterwards, is if, I think you could put like a Zeb on this, if you could get a 150 Zeb. I think a 150 Zeb on this bike would be sick, because you would have the weight savings, but you would have the 38 mil stanchions. Me being a heavy rider again, wouldn't hold it back, and being the 38 mil stanchions versus the 36 mil stanchions, I don't think that you would use the same travel. Not to mention the stack height on the fork itself would have made up the difference for the geometry. So I think the geometry would have stayed the exact same. That would have been cool. That would have been a cool fork to put on this. I also thought about putting the Domain on this. And I think the Domain, same thing. I think they only go up, I think they start at like 160. Oh, they don't have it there. I'm just looking real quick. Just real quick. So just bear with me. I'm looking to see if they have a Domain 150. They have a Domain 150. So the biggest reason why I didn't get the Domain, oh shoot. The main reason I didn't get the Domain is because it's a half-pound heavier, a whole half-pound heavier than the RockShox Zeb. See the options are here. Ooh, they do make a 150. See, they don't make a 150, and that shock is cheap too. Oh man, that might be the way to go. Because they don't make a 150 Zeb, but they make a 150 Domain. This might have been the route I should have went. Dang it. It's not too late, but dang it. Just like the Zeb. I didn't see a 150 Zeb. Who else knows about? I'm going to check again. Let's go. I thought I only seen the Zeb in 160. Yeah. 160, 160, 190. Yeah, travel options start at 160. Ooh. Well, nonetheless, I think I'm going to run this Marzocchi Bomber first. We'll see now. God, I have to recontemplate this. Because I think a 150 38 mil stanchion on this bike would be fine, because those stanchions are a little bit taller, so you're still gonna get the same geo. Or the crown is a little bit taller. Oh my gosh. Anyways, the bike is going to be very versatile as it is. And the reason I didn't get the Zeb is because it was a half-pound heavier. And now I'm looking at the half-pound, but being a 150 38 mil stanchion, that feels. Anyways, I can't wait to weigh the Marzocchi Bomber. myself after I cut the steer tube, because I think it's either right at 5 pounds or just under 5 pounds. And I think a half pound weight penalty for a 38 mil stanchion fork might be okay. Might be okay. Anyways, that's where I'm at, guys. Probably should get the bike on Friday and start putting it together, and hopefully have it ready to ride by Sunday, so I can do my first ride review. God, I can't believe that domain comes in a 150. Dang it. I wish I would have looked into that a little bit deeper. Out of all the research I did, I can't believe that I didn't see that. Anyways, getting off subject here because I'm trying to get out of here. I got a bike ride. I'm going to go meet a friend and go do a ride on my Bronson, do a little trail ride, and talk about bikes, just like I did with you guys today. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you guys listening. Peace out. Go ride your bike.